What's your number one tip to make a dieting phase easier?
What is your favorite and least favorite part of dieting?
It's simply just feeling good. I think a lot of people have a misperception of being on a diet isn't a good experience. It's the complete opposite.
We're all kind of a bit soft in a way.
Deadlines drive decisions.
Part of the process of growing up in your transformation is when you start to really notice the effect that the food you consume has on your training ability and performance. I'm yeah, you've probably stepped into the realm of hard training now.
This is the Future Fitness Lifestyle, the podcast for high achievers who want to take control of their long-term physical and mental well-being. I'm Matt Cooney, and every week we break down the habits, mindset and strategies to build lasting health, energy and strength without sacrificing your career, family or lifestyle. No quick fixes, no fads, just real sustainable results. Because the choices you make today determine the future you step into. Ready to level up? Let's dive in.
Hello, welcome back to another episode. Today we're going to do a fat loss Q&A. So we're going to get straight into it. The first question I want to ask everyone today is, how is their diet going? Because we're all in a deficit now and been dieting a couple of weeks. And I think it's quite interesting because I think all of us have had challenges starting out. Obviously, Tommy, you are a couple of days out from doing a marathon. I know, Ro, you were doing more of a gut health protocol, and myself and Eve have been traveling a bit the last couple of weeks. So I think it's fair to say all of us probably have had our fair share of challenges or not the ideal environment to start a diet. Would that be true?
Yes. I would say I started my diet on 2 weeks off training, which was not a good start. But I hit a low this morning, so happy.
We all actually did, which is very random. We just, before we press record, we all just realized all hit low weigh-ins. So
yeah,
it's working anyway. So you had 2 weeks off training and you were doing more of a gut health anti-inflammatory diet.
So, and I'm still kind of on that. I'm slowly introducing different foods back in to see what was the main culprit, which I don't want to find out. 2 or 3 weeks with no dairy, no spice. What else? A lot of food that I thought I couldn't live without. I've done 2 or 3 weeks without it, so I'm very proud of myself.
How did you find that? Because I know you love variety, spices, all that.
It wasn't actually too bad. I like to change up my food, but the last couple of weeks I've stayed to pretty much the same. But yeah, I think when you know what I'm doing it for, it was easier, but a lot easier than I thought it was going to be. I thought I would miss spice, especially.
I find that is so interesting with food, especially is those habits you have or foods where you're I definitely couldn't live without that. And then when you do, after a couple of days, you're okay, yeah, I can actually do that. I found that for me, especially with traveling, when we move certain places, our food might change and meals. Oats is a big one. If you remember years ago, our dinner, me and Eve's dinner was oats every day for years. And we were swore that our kids would be eating oats for dinner every day, and we don't have them now. We do, but not for dinner.
I haven't had oats in months.
Yeah, I would have put a large sum of money years ago that I'd never change, and then when I don't know how or why, but it's funny how meals, even your tastes, things like that can change over time, or again, you don't think you can do something and then you actually do it and you usually realize, yeah, it's not that bad. Well, Ro, you proved yourself you can live the bodybuilder lifestyle that you do. I think though, knowing that you're only doing it for a few weeks also is very good mentally, because if you're this is it for life, I don't know.
Yeah, just doing a few weeks elimination style diet definitely worked for you, I think, and now it's kind of the reintroduction process, so slowly adding back in foods that she was already eating, but just seeing how her body responds, and then we'll be able to get a little bit more data from that. But definitely think it was successful, as in you feel so much better and your digestion so much better. It definitely paid off, even though it was probably hard as well to not train for 2 weeks and
but
give your body that bit of a rest.
It was the training that was probably the toughest, but as soon as I did the first week off training, I could feel it in my body. My body was I need to rest. You said we're resting, we are resting. So like my energy was just at a low, but definitely feeling a lot better now.
Tommy, how about you? How have you found it?
Yeah, I think I'm into, this is my third week now of being in back on diet, like calorie deficit, and I think when I started, I was at I was at one of my highest weights, and it definitely thought that once I kind of started back on the diet, that the weight would start to fall off quite quickly, as it normally tends to do. But it definitely has been a lot slower, and even some mornings there when I wake up, uh, so interesting. And it's not that I have a negative relationship with the scales, but when I wake up, I feel great, and I'm like definitely gonna be under 180 today again on the scales. It's still 180, and I'm like, it's like. So when I sat down this morning and it had dropped like 2 pounds, I was like, I could feel it in my body for ages, but obviously, um, what's it? It just kind of showed up in that today. But like the last 2.5 weeks, just being back on the diet has had such a major influence on so many other things, which of course we all know. Just my sleep has been great, my digestion has been great, and overall mood, just how I feel in my body, I'm less bloated, just because I'm not obviously over consuming, and particularly snacks late at night. That's definitely the conflict of the good and the bad with me. It was funny last night just having my last meal, and my mind always like just goes to like, you're not allowed to have anything after this now. This is your last meal. So I'm enjoying it more because I'm being very conscious, I'm being very mindful as well of my meal. Like last night, I'm really trying to slow down my eating. I know we've talked about that before. Literally just putting down the knife and the fork and trying to enjoy it more. But it was just interesting last night that that's the thought that came into my head. It was like, time was, I think it was like, uh, so 8:30. And I was like, this is it now for the rest of the night.
Yeah, and that's the thing with a lot of people that in the evening, exactly, is like the main time where a lot of people can find difficult. And it's usually just because it's the first time in the day you really slow down and you actually get a chance to sit down. But definitely, like you said, actually being mindful with your meals. And I think that's definitely something that I notice a lot more with dieting for myself is like I actually appreciate food a lot more versus when I'm not. Sometimes I'm not really focused, I suppose, on food. I don't, again, take my time at meals as much as I should, or not eating with distractions, and definitely, especially as I get into the diet more and more, to value my meals and my food a lot more. Eve, how have you found the start? And it's funny, Tommy, you said that your weight usually goes down quickly. Mine and Eve's doesn't usually go down quickly, but it actually has. Both of us, weirdly enough.
Yeah, I'm the same as Tommy, where I kind of started this prep as my like heaviest weight for any other photo shoot prep in the last couple of years. And usually for me, when I start a dieting phase, it will take me weeks to actually see the scales change. I think even 1 year, it was as long as 6 weeks. I was actually like dieting for 6 weeks before the scales moved once. And at the beginning, like that used to really frustrate me, and I used to be like, okay, why I can't lose weight? I'm broken. There's something wrong with me. Um, that's what used to go through my head. But now, after a couple of years of obviously dieting and doing photo shoots and losing weight, I understand that it's a slow process and it takes a lot longer to see that progress. But I kind of know that now, whereas I think in the past, years ago, I probably would have just given up and thought that I can't lose weight or I can't make progress. But this year has been like a completely different story. I'm actually kind of still a bit shocked by what's happening, but even coming out of the back of Christmas, I was probably my heaviest weight that I've been starting the new year. And I didn't start dieting straight away. I really, just after Christmas, I took 2 months to kind of just clean up my diet, get the good habits back in place, eat well. And I was expecting that just by doing that, I'd probably lose a couple of pounds, but didn't change for those first 2 months. and then started my dieting phase. I think this is my third week now, so I've 2 weeks dieting done. And since I've started dieting, my weight has literally nearly come down every single day. Like I'm losing about 0.2, 0.3, 0.4 of a pound every day. And I'm like, I have no idea what's going on because it never happens like this for me. But yeah, it's going good so far. And I hope it lasts for another couple of weeks. But yeah, still have a long way to go. But I definitely think it's been a really good start. And it usually takes me a lot longer to see this. So yeah, it's weird. Every diet is different. And I definitely think from working with a lot of people over the years, even, they've done multiple dieting phases, I think it can be different process every time, or your body's going to respond in a different way. But I definitely think the reason that my body is responding so well this time is because spent pretty much 10 months at maintenance, pretty much 8 months wasn't tracking calories, have been sleeping probably the best my sleep's ever been in the last couple of months, and stress levels are managed a lot better. And I definitely think that's just made the dieting phase start a lot smoother, but I'm sure it will get hard.
It's the first year you've had a Whoop, so you've actually been tracking your sleep and stress, and you love numbers.
Yeah.
So that could be an advertisement for Whoop. But yeah, it's interesting how you said it. Like it's so different. Every dieting phase can be different, and I've had this over the last couple of weeks with a couple of people as well. Similar, no, not Eve's scenario, more Tommy's scenario, where they're doing all the right things and it's just not showing on the scales. And often this will happen, and what even happens is you start to see it first, and then you feel it, and then you see it, but then it doesn't show it on the scales, and it's like that's where often people get in their own head, or they feel like, okay, there's something I'm not doing. Am I doing everything right? And that's where like just reassurance and even knowing you're doing the right things. So making sure you're monitoring the right things, that you're in a deficit, you're doing it, is really important than it is just patience, because it's always going to happen when you're doing the right things. And like both, it's funny that I think I had 2 or 3 conversations and they all hit this low on the same day. It was like after we had the conversation, which is funny. But yeah, I think for me anyway as well, Eve said it, the actual, I call it like the diet, setting yourself up
Pre-diet.
before a dieting phase is really, really beneficial, and that the body just becomes so much more responsive. So especially when you start a dieting phase, you kind of want to start it from as high food, as high calories as possible, output or activity being not super high, like moderate. Probably don't want it super low either, but just at a moderate amount of activity, and fatigue being low. When you start with those, it gives yourself the best. I look at it like a runway, the biggest runway possible for the dieting phase. Because if you take the opposite, if you start, you're already on low calories, highly fatigued, and a high amount of activity, and you're starting a diet, it's like your runway is pretty short. You can't just keep the fatigue, you're just going to get over fatigued. Where do you go with calories? Do you start to sleep on a treadmill? There's not much room. So I think that's a really important thing for people to know, is because sometimes, especially with like fat loss, is like that's all that people focus on, but it's actually everything else you do around it that makes the dieting phase so much easier. And especially, we talk about lifestyle. If you have the habits and routines in place, when you then come to your fat loss phase, you're not having to transform your life. You're literally just making these small adjustments to monitoring your nutrition or getting a little bit more active. And Tommy, you said it, what happens when you do that as well, which I find a big benefit, is like it has such a knock-on effect. And because your sleep usually improves, because you're nailing your nutrition more, again, your training often can improve, and it all has this knock-on effect. A lot of people are a lot more productive as well, I find, day to day, because you kind of have to be. So next question I want to ask everyone is, what is your favorite and least favorite part of dieting? Anyone want to jump?
I was waiting. I'll go first. My favorite is probably like the knock-on effect on everything else. I feel like when you're in a dieting phase, it's just like your work ethic, everything else just focuses in, because you're like, I'm in this period now, so I might as well just go all in on every area. So that's what I love. I just love the structure, the routine, and just the focus for the 2 months. My least favorite, I was going to say other people's opinions when you say you're dieting. Yeah, just kind of maybe that when you do say you're on a diet, like some people will look at you and they assume you're nibbling on lettuce and air for a couple of months. Or just a little like my weekend maybe activities of like going for a coffee and a nice pastry or going out for a nice meal or something like that. That's probably what I miss. But yeah, I think because it's I think it's because this is what my third or fourth year doing it, that they kind of change all the time because I'm used to it now. So like before, would have been my least favorite would have been maybe get that energy slump at the end of the day. That would be me.
Yeah. Tommy?
For me, definitely, I'd start with least favorite. Would probably be similar enough. It's just the uh, going out and having like a coffee and having like a nice breakfast. But not a nice breakfast, but maybe like a savory breakfast. It's just something I like to do at the weekends. It's not that I hate it because it is only for a time period, but if I just say it's my least favorite thing, probably be that. And maybe because I know at certain times when I've done certain diets, the energy hasn't affected me as bad as other times. As you said, every diet is kind of different. There's been times where I've been on a diet and my energy has been good throughout the whole process, whereas there has been other times where it has been quite low, and that obviously does have an impact on you. My favorite thing about being on a diet is definitely the self-discipline that it provides because it has such a knock-on effect on to other areas of your life, like you said, Matt, about being productive and that. Um, the self-discipline that you do learn from being structured and being in a routine um, can influence so many other areas of your life. Obviously, one other thing, I know you asked for one thing, but it's simply just feeling good. I think a lot of people have a misperception of being on a diet isn't a good experience. It's the complete opposite. You feel amazing, so you do, because you're fueling your body with healthy, nutritious food. And the thing that always gets me is the fact that people think when you're on a diet that you're starving yourself. It's the complete opposite. We overconsume way too much. When you're simply just being on a diet, yeah, you're, let's say, having less calories than what you would on a maintenance, but you're not starving yourself. Like when you think of hunger and you think of real starvation, okay, that's when people's uh, reality needs a good knock.
Yeah, and I think like what the lads were saying there, just that they kind of struggle with maybe missing going for a pastry at the weekend or, you know, eating a nice meal out. But I think what's kind of helped me with that over the last couple of weeks is I've kind of been like, okay, I've been for the last 10 months, I've been having pastries every week. I've been having really going to a restaurant and being like, okay, I want that. I'm having that. And I was like, okay, it's just a period of 10 to 12 weeks now where I have to cut out the pastry because it's wasting too many calories. And if I'm eating out in a restaurant, I just have to be a little bit more smarter with my choices, or, you know, I'm not able to choose the higher calorie option. But I think that's really helped me where I'm just like, okay, I've literally been doing that for 10 months. I've allowed myself whatever I've wanted, obviously within reason, but now it's just a short period of time. And I do think you appreciate the things a lot more then as well. Even like my oatmeal cappuccino, you know, having that once a week instead of having it a little bit more often. Yeah, I just think I really, really do appreciate those little things so much more. But for me, my favorite part of dieting, similar to the lads, like the discipline and just feeling really good, feeling really healthy, just digestion is really good, and just having that structure and routine, and it really kind of comes across in other areas of your life as well, like you were all talking about productivity, or, you know, just generally feeling so much better. The worst thing about dieting, I would say, is probably the energy levels. Like at the moment it's obviously fine, but I know those last couple of weeks will probably hit that wall with energy where you just really can feel every little action is so much effort. Like I'm leaning up against things in the gym, or I'm like dragging myself around, and like I just get so tired near the end. And like I think the only time I like last year's photo shoot, I think the only time I used to have like good energy was in the gym. Anything around that was like Okay, no, like if I was thirsty and needed a glass of water, I was like, no, I'm not walking
Or
to
your
the kitchen.
social battery.
There's no one. Like I have to
Very, very
yeah.
dramatic, Eve.
I get that. I get
No,
that.
I'm not
Even if
being
the water bottle
dramatic.
is further than a hand, arm's length away, you're like, oh,
Yeah, yeah. I was like going to get one of those straws that like attach, so you
just
just
get
don't
one of
have
those
to
running bags
put
with
it
the
into your mouth.
water on your back.
Even though it is putting, does anyone else find putting on your runners? I always am like, at the end of a diet, I'd be like, I want one of those, those sticks that just clip your runners in,
Yeah.
like that people use.
A
That's,
shoehorn.
yeah, that's it. I'm like, I need them, but
I'll
yeah,
tell you a
it
funny
is.
story. I like everything that you're saying there about energy for me just brings you back to the competition. And I remember walking down Drummond Road, and obviously, the footpaths. So footpaths are like this. They go up, they're down, up, down, up, down. I was at a point, I think it was like, could have been like 2 weeks out, and I literally had to make a decision that I can't actually walk on the footpath. I have to walk on the road because the road was flat. The pathway, it was just taking me too much to even just do that.
Every little step.
It is
Yeah.
so
Literally,
true.
when you talk about energy,
Yeah, that's energy conservation now, that at its
Your
finest.
social battery as well. Like towards the end of the diet, it's like you don't even have like the energy to like have regular conversations, and that's why I think it's great to have a group of people, because you're able to be like, okay, these people don't understand me, the everyday people, but like at least there's a group here that I can message and they get me.
Yeah. And I think it's important though for any listeners as well to understand this is not like everything we're talking about here is usually the end of a diet when you've been dieting for a long time, and it's only usually for a couple of weeks. And I always think of like extremes, like you said, Tommy, it's like when you're prepping for a bodybuilding show, like getting on stage, it's obviously the extreme of the extreme. And that's where you see a lot of the
Negatives.
negatives that can happen. And it is funny because I don't think it was you. It could have been Darren Cuddy. I remember saying they were about 6 weeks out from competition. I was like explaining to him in a voice note. I'm like, okay, this is the point where your body is actually kind of fighting back, and all it's going to want to do is move less and get you to eat more. So I'm like, you're going to end up leaning against things, sitting down instead of standing up. All that I was explaining all this, and he voiced it back. He's like, I literally had one hand against the wall, listening, just like leaning. He's like leaning into the wall, listening to the voice. I'm like, I know you don't even know you're doing it. Your body is literally just trying to
Yeah.
conserve energy any way
Yeah.
it can. But yeah, it actually is quite an interesting thing and an interesting process, especially when you become aware of it. But yeah, to go, I think we're all. It's funny, we all kind of have similar favorite and least favorite parts. So mine is both two things: progress and discipline. Progress being the first one is actually getting to see the progress you've made. Because for me, I diet like once a year. The other 9 months is about 6 to 9 months is spent trying to build muscle. Probably six, and then I have maybe three at maintenance because I live a bit
Life.
more. I'm not really care about the gym. But so if anyone thinks losing fat is slow, you need to try building muscle. It is terribly, terribly slow, especially when you're natural, not taking steroids, and the more advanced you get. So for me, even over that 6 to 9 months, you don't even really know if you're building muscle or not, because it's very hard to tell, and especially you will have signs, but like when we talk about trusting the process with building muscle, you really do have to just focus on kind of ticking the boxes, taking any little sign that you can get. Like for me, for example, this year I'm like 4 pounds above my starting weight from last year for the diet, and my body composition is like pretty much the same, I would say, maybe actually even a little bit better, which is a good indication for me that I've probably gained some muscle. But I still won't really know until, because I have more body fat at the moment, until I get leaner. So, like, for me, it's nearly like once a year at this point where I get to like look and go, okay, have I made progress over the last year? So that's something I like, is getting to see that. And I think with dieting, once I've done like 9 months of building muscle, it's dieting kind of seems very quick, as in like in a few weeks I can see progress. And the second thing is discipline. Yeah, I just love the discipline of it all, even sometimes against my will. Like, as in, I don't feel like I love it at the time, but it's the aftermath of it. And I do think Tommy, I think you said it. It's like for all of us, we're all gone a bit soft in a way. We do. Everything is very convenient, and it's. I won't say life is easy, but like, yeah, I think having a dieting phase and actually voluntarily putting yourself in that position to have the discipline to say no to certain things, to monitor your intake, to do those things you need to do is very good for us humans to do. And especially like once a year at least, and I think I was trying to think of the least favorite. And I was kind of like you, Roisin, with kind of the finer things in life, like the croissant, being able to do that. But then I don't know. I kind of like, in a way, having to have the discipline or making those sacrifices for a period of time because, Eve, you said it. Actually, you appreciate it more, and so weirdly, I kind of like that thing. So I was trying to
Yeah.
think of why I don't like. What would my least favorite thing be? I think maybe it's just the effort. I know that sounds, but like it's a lot. The effort of like having to monitor my nutrition closely to do all the things you need to do. It's not that I don't enjoy it, but I would say throughout the year, because of the habits and routines I have, I don't have to put too much effort into nutrition. Like obviously I train hard and stuff, but I can kind of maintain or hit my calories, protein, get in fruits and vegetables just through habits without really putting too much effort in. So I'd say it's just the effort of it. But I don't know, would I say that's my least favorite? It's just what kind of comes to mind, Any other thoughts?
I think we all said similar things.
Yeah, it's like
Yeah, but I
we
think it's
reversed
also
it.
very, like Tommy said it there, and Eve said as well,
No,
like the appreciation of the food that when we do have it. And that's even something I noticed in the last 3 weeks when I did have to strip back on the food I was eating, because I was like, oh, this food is going to help me, is going to benefit me so much more. Like I had so much more appreciation for the food, even though it was kind of the same stuff every day. But I think that's very, really important. Like showing the appreciation and having that mindfulness around food makes it a lot easier and a lot more enjoyable to do.
I think understanding the value of food as well, as in the nutrients, the energy it actually gives you, is important, and something I've been thinking about lately. I think with nutrition, there's like different levels, and like there's always new levels to go to, and you have your basic level of like understanding calories, getting your protein, but I feel like as you get more and more advanced, even for me, I'm much more like in tune with like the quality of the foods I'm consuming and how they really affect my body and how I feel off them, and like trying to improve that, not just like trying to hit my macros or trying to hit my calories or be in my deficits. Like, how can I actually fuel my body even better than I have been, And that's where, and for somebody starting out, that's probably too advanced, maybe they just need to get a little bit of a healthy structure or stop eat a little bit less junk. But then I feel like there's always levels to it, that, and I suppose that's where that kind of appreciation for that food comes in a lot more. And I find that even for like training performance and that, I say this to some clients. I'm like, this is part of the process of growing up in your transformation, is like when you start to really notice the effect that like the food you consume has on your training ability and performance. I'm like, yeah, you've probably stepped into the realm of like hard training now,
I like that. That's something I say before.
Also for you, Tommy, endurance stuff.
I was just saying that's what I
Go
do. I've been doing this for the last couple of months now. Is before I have my meal, is like I'll stop and I'll appreciate everybody that worked behind the scenes to get it on my plate. And then I'm like, I appreciate all the nutrients it's going to give my body. And I have a little moment and then everything just tastes better.
That is part of the like digestion process though, is things like the textures, the tastes, the appearance, the way it looks on the plate. There's so many things that you wouldn't realize go into the smell. Your senses essentially is actually all affects your digestion, how you feel about the food. Because again, this is why if you hate the food you're consuming, you're actually already giving yourself a disadvantage with digestion, because digestion starts in the brain, then it goes down towards the mouth. It's like you're actually already putting yourself off, and
I think if you're
yeah, it's just interesting.
If
And I
you're
was going to
eating
say,
from a place of guilt, you know, when like if you're eating like something and you feel guilty about it, that's not going to help your digestion at all. And we tend to eat faster. I actually did a podcast on this, but we tend to eat faster when it's guilt or shame because you're trying to get rid of it, and so you're not actually really enjoying the food or digesting it properly.
Yeah, that's so true. And I definitely think as well, like you said there, you need to like enjoy the foods you're eating. And especially when you are dieting, I think obviously, you know, you want to make sure that you're ticking the boxes, like, you know, getting enough proper, good quality foods. But it's also important that, you know, you still allow yourself and kind of work in things you enjoy as well.
And I think going back to the training side of it, Matt, you talked about, again, I'm probably talking more about debunking myths here about being in a fat loss phase, but the training aspect side of it and the performance side of it. Like a lot of people have a perception of that, like you lose your strength, you get weaker in the gym, when actually it's the complete opposite. For me anyway, I know because I can test it and admit that, like when I'm on a structured and routine diet, I'm actually fueling my body, and my weights, my reps, they all increase in the gym. They don't decrease. I often will get stronger in the gym through a period of time. Obviously, it might plateau at some point, but my progress from where I started the diet phase to where I ended it, if I was to look at the data, most of my weights will have gone up sort of well. The only, I would say, difficult moment in that is obviously the energy wise of things. Sometimes it might feel a
A
bit
lot harder.
more, yeah, near the end of it, yeah.
everything takes
But
more energy to do, but
You see
you can
Bulgarian
still
yes,
do
split
it,
squats and you're like,
you know.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah, like the same. I think that comes up so much with clients where they're like, "Oh, I'm going to be weaker now. I'm starting dieting." Or I've actually had it happen a couple of times over the last few weeks. A client is actually shocked that they're still getting stronger and progressing. But like, if you're dieting properly, you're not using a crazy, stupid, aggressive deficit. You should actually still be able to progress and get stronger. And it's really just, you know, towards those last couple of weeks where you might see that, okay, you hit a bit of a plateau, or, you know, you might even just be able to maintain exercises. But ideally, you should at least be able to kind of maintain. I think for myself, last year, I was probably able to progress or maintain most things. I think it was my presses, dumbbell presses. I just could not, like, they just fell apart. Like, I
They're
just
just
could
hard.
not do it.
They're just hard to progress all year round, though.
I
Like
just dropped like
anyone,
five reps on them.
it's so funny. Everybody like asks me that question about dumbbell presses, or usually like those pressing movements. It's like I find it so hard to progress on these. I'm like, I know absolutely everybody does. Unless I find some, I need to find some that just can they just fly up all the time. Probably some with really like short arms.
little T-Rex.
Yeah, they
Little
just have to
T-Rex.
move from here to here, and they just keep moving. Does anyone else have any questions? I have like one or two more here, but any of Ro, Tommy, Eve, any questions you want to ask or topics to?
What's your like number one tip to make a dieting phase easier? Like from doing a photo shoot prep over the last, Tommy nearly 10 years, Roisin 4 years, Matt nearly 10 years. What's like the biggest kind of tip you could give someone to make their dieting phase run as smoothly as possible?
I think we've already touched on it, but for me, definitely, it's just enjoying the food you eat. Like I love my morning breakfast, granola, fruit, protein yogurt. Um, it's something I just love to eat. Like already right now, I'm like, okay, in like 15, 20 minutes, I get to have that. Um, Obviously, I'm not having as much as what I might normally have, but that's okay. All the foods that I eat, uh, there isn't anything in my diet that I'm like, oh, I don't want to eat this. This doesn't taste good to me. That does not uh, that does not. Um, Having a bit of diet brain right now, but that's not a reality in my life, so it's not. Obviously, that just comes from years and years of becoming more knowledgeable and obviously being coached by you guys with that, and definitely living with Joe, eating lots of different, more variety of food too, which has been really, really great. But I get it, I understand it. Obviously, going back to my own first phase of life when it came to nutrition, that the whole chicken and rice and God, I don't even want to talk about the things that I did used to eat. But anyway, and that would definitely be my number one tip is just make sure you're eating foods that you enjoy. Just because you can't have more of it doesn't mean that you still can't enjoy what you once
Yeah,
had.
I would say
Nice.
like meal prepping, just having a kind of an idea of what you're eating during the week, because it takes the guesswork out. And like Tommy, like, yeah, you can have delicious food. It doesn't have to be all plain. Like even me, like I have a sweet tooth and I still have my little chocolate mousse in the evening, but I find sneaky ways of like putting, like, it's a sweet potato, which is probably disgusting to people, but it tastes so good. But I find little ways to still have my treats, and I'm not like restricting so much on the foods. But meal prepping is definitely a huge thing because it takes the guesswork out and it just makes it
I like both of them. Mine would be commit to it. You have to commit to the diet and to the actual phase, because if you don't, you're always going to come up with challenges. It's always going to be, it's kind of like, choose your hard. Life is going to be hard either way. So you have to commit to it. I find if you don't, and then you're kind of like dipping your toe in or you're half in and out, that will cause a lot of frustration. And when, you have those days with low energy or you can't be bothered meal prepping, going to the gym, you're going to back out versus when you've committed to something, it's like hail, rain, or snow, it doesn't matter. You get the job done. And that's where you will see the progress and have the success with it. And I think I've seen a lot of people over the years that will are kind of there, as in like they know how to track calories, they know what they shouldn't be eating, but they don't really fully make the progress that they should in these dieting phases. And it's just because they don't commit 100% to it. And when you think of it, we're not naturally made to diet, to lose body fat. We are kind of going against our natural instincts over time, which is to eat more, move less, which is why the population is so sedentary and obesity is rising. So naturally, when you're dieting, without being too dramatic, you're going against our natural instincts. So you have to commit to that, to know when those things arise, I need to overcome them. When you feel a little bit of hunger, okay, I need to manage that. When you don't want to go for a walk or do the workout, okay, how can I do this? And that's where I think, like we said, the discipline, the growth, that's where the actual enjoyment for the process comes in, is like proving to yourself that you can do it. So that would be my biggest thing.
Yeah. Yeah, and then I think my one is, I know Roisin said meal prep, but for me, my biggest tip, what I would say is find what works for you, a structure that works for you. So like everyone's obviously going to be different. Like Roisin, you do a lot of prepping at the weekend. You kind of prep out your meals for the week on a Sunday. Whereas for me, I don't meal prep. I never have really meal prepped. Even when I worked in retail, I kind of just used to bring foods that I didn't need to cook during my workday. But for me, I definitely think the most important thing is find a structure that works for you. So whether that's meal prepping like Roisin or whatever kind of way you want to do it. And I think definitely for me over the last couple of years, like I kind of find little ways to save time or make things a bit easier each year. And I definitely think like what works for me now is having 3 large meals per day and one little treat in the evening time. Like my first meal takes me 2 or 3 minutes to put together. Second meal takes me 2 or 3 minutes to put together. And then the evening meal is, probably takes me like 10 or 15 minutes to cook. And then my treat each night. But like, I like to go with that structure of having 3 bigger meals, because if I'm having like smaller meals and loads of snacks, I'm just not going to feel full or satisfied. Whereas if I'm having bigger meals less often, it's less to think about, less decisions, and it just helps me kind of tick the boxes.
Yep. And I think
Is
planning
that
is
No,
Frodo?
everything.
this is my dog, my
No,
neighbor.
that's in Russian's background, I'm sure. He's there, all right, though.
We have two more kind of questions to cover. One on the scales, we've kind of covered it. Another one here is, during a fat loss phase, at what point, when would you increase calories back to maintenance? Do you want to answer that, or will I?
Yeah. So during a fat loss phase, when would you finish a diet and move back to maintenance? So what I would do with this question here is when you're starting a dieting phase, you need to give yourself a timeline. I wouldn't just be like, okay, I'm going to start a diet tomorrow and not know that, okay, I'm doing this for 8 weeks, I'm doing this for 12 weeks. Having an actual deadline is so important because, like Matt says, deadlines drive decisions. It gives you a target or an end state to work towards. So, what I would say here is when to finish, when you know when to move back to maintenance is at the end of your dieting phase. And when you've kind of got to the point where it's time to finish up and move your calories back up.
And I think with it, there's kind of a short answer and a long answer. So
Yeah.
the short answer is you increase calories back to maintenance when you finish the diet, when it's over. Like technically, when you're in a deficit, you're dieting. When you're at maintenance, it means you're eating at a maintenance level where you're maintaining your weight. So that's where you would do that at the end of the diet. There is probably two other places you could use where, like, times where you increase calories to maintenance. One is if you do refeed days. So basically, sometimes what you might do is run 5 or 6 days in a deficit and then give yourself one day at maintenance calories. So, for example, to use generic numbers that are easy for my maths, if you're on 2,500 calories, your maintenance is 3,000. You might do 6 days at 2,500, one at 3,000, just to have flexibility, or again, just to have these higher calorie days. They work well for some people. Then sometimes you can do a diet break, which means if you're going to diet for a long period of time, let's say 16 weeks, you may go, okay, I'm going to do 6, 7, 8 weeks, and then I'm going to have 1 week at maintenance where I bring my calories up to maintenance level, and then I use it often as like a mental physical break. Might even be, you have things on that you don't want to be dieting for, and then you go back into the dieting phase. So there are kind of two
Yeah, it's
other,
kind of like recharging the batteries to kind of push on again.
yeah, and yeah, they're the kind of times you would. Also, when you finish a diet, there is, I suppose it's important to know that your maintenance calories can change over time. So what your actual maintenance is, and this is where sometimes people make a mistake when they finish a diet, is they just kind of go back to what they thought their maintenance was, and then you can end up kind of over consuming. Because what often happens when you finish a diet is you're probably going to be like doing more like cardio or steps as well. So sometimes people overshoot their maintenance, and then they go from, like, doing 3 or 4 days of cardio to none, and doing like 15,000 steps down to like 5. So they're going way above their maintenance. And this is where people sometimes will gain weight, or even if this is where people will finish a diet and they literally just go from one extreme to the next. They're like, oh yeah, I'm not just going to eat what I want now for a while. If you've ever heard that before, and then it's like, that doesn't work. That's why you'll end up gaining weight pretty quickly. So that's where you kind of need to figure out where your main maintenance is, and then give yourself a couple of weeks to kind of like build those calories up after you finish a diet. You can go through what's called a reverse diet, which is kind of slower version of building up your calories. Yeah, I think, does that make sense to everyone here?
Yeah. Yeah, I think as well, just to touch on that, like what you said there about going up to maintenance. Usually, what I do with clients at the end of a diet when we are going up to maintenance is I will undershoot it a bit, because when you're dieting, you're a lot more stricter. But if you move up to maintenance and then you're also adding in meals out, more flexibility, more relaxed approach, like you said, you can just end up way overshooting that.
Yeah, the little things like the
So
milk and the
yeah, I
coffee,
think
all these things that you didn't realize you were tracking or watching, they all add up then as well.
Yeah, that's where it's like, it's important when you finish a dieting phase that it is a controlled approach. I always say to a lot of people, the post diet can sometimes, the 4 weeks after finishing a diet can actually be harder than the 4 weeks going into it, because you don't have the same level of motivation. Again, you want to have that bit more flexibility, but you don't want to have too much. And when you're at the end of a diet, especially if you have a goal deadline to work towards, you can be very motivated and committed. So even though it's hard, it's actually easy to stick to, because it's like you're at that point of like, put a truck in front of me and I'll go through it. So then when you remove that goal or deadline, it can be quite hard, because that's often people, like, I heard this, would hear years ago, it's like they'd be like, oh yeah, I'm just going to keep doing the same thing that I was doing. You're not. It's like, if someone goes to the Olympics, when they finish the Olympics, they're not just going to go, I'm going to go back to train like I was for before the Olympics. It's like, no, you're not. You have another 4 years to wait. So it's probably another podcast topic of actually finishing a dieting phase and how to do that correctly, because again, the goal is not just to lose body fat,
and the mindset around that as well is we could do a whole podcast, because the mindset and everything around it coming off a dieting phase can something I struggled with in my first one.
Yeah, even getting people to increase their calories sometimes is quite hard, because there's
be resistant to it.
Yeah, and realistically, that's psychological. It's pretty much 100% psychological.
The fear.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a story for another day. So yeah, I think finishing question, we have a random question, which is quite random this week. What do you think
always random.
What do you think is the most complex aspect about yourself?
Question.
I feel like one of you should answer this for me. Yeah, I told you it was random.
Complex.
I'm gonna repeat it just to give you time as well. And what do you think is the most complex aspect about yourself? Yeah, where do you start with that?
That was definitely asked by a bot.
It was a random. Yeah, it's the random question generator thing I use.
This is the random question.
No,
this is the finishing question. We always ask a random. It's not about dieting, Eve.
I thought somebody sent that in. I was like, what the fuck? This is a podcast on nutrition.
Yeah, I would say my mind, the way I see the world, is pretty complex.
What's not complex about?
Yeah, we're all fucking.
There's plenty of complex things about it.
Yeah.
That's a really difficult question. I'm trying to think of something.
I feel like Tommy has a very deep answer. I'm going to say my emotions. I feel like emotions are quite complex things.
You're not wrong there.
Yeah. I don't even know what you're meant to answer for a question like that.
There's just a lot of layers to it.
I would say, for me, and probably what's going on for me, I don't know, it's complex because I don't really understand it, and I'd like to know more about it. So I'd say that is my hormones and male hormones, because you hear so much about female hormones and that. So for me, I'll say my own hormones and how they impact me on a day-to-day basis.
That's a good one. That's interesting.
They definitely are complex. Yeah. Eve, anything to finish?
No, I'm not a complex person.
Well, what a way to finish.
I better cut this off before it starts an argument. Gabriel, thank you for joining. We will see you all next week.
Bye. Thank you.
That's a wrap for this episode of the Future Fitness Lifestyle. If you found value in today's conversation, do me a favor. Leave a review, share it with a friend, or tag me on social media. Every share and review allows us to reach more people and bring you even more great content. Stay tuned for weekly episodes packed with insights to help you optimize your health, fitness, and mindset. And if you're ready to take things to the next level and join the MC Future Fitness community, click the link in the description, fill in the application, and let's get started. Thanks for tuning in.